Let's give everyone one more minute to come on. I just heard from Andrew Nave. He said he might be a little bit late. All right, we're still not a full house yet, but Representative Tarwater, Tiana, are you fine with getting started?
Yes, that's fine. How many are on?
Let's see, 5, I believe.
Yeah, I'd say we probably ought to get started.
Okay. Well, I'll just start this session by saying thank you to everyone up front for all the work that I know everyone put into going through all of the idea submissions. There were just so many idea submissions in this area that I know that was absolutely yeoman's work. And so I apologize for that. And I also really thank you. So in this session, we're going to end up spending a lot of time talking through those idea submissions that you have all rated for fit. And for those parts of the sessions just up front, I'm going to hand those over to Representative Tarwater and TN to be able to facilitate those discussions. So I think they're going to be great discussions. In terms of getting to that point, there are a few kind of preliminary slides, just providing some context and kind of where this discussion sits and kind of the journey that we've been on and the feedback along the way and the decisions that the panel has made, just to provide context for those discussions. Before I jump into that though, and like I said, I'm going to try and make my upfront piece maybe 5 minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over. Any comments or thoughts, Tian or Representative Tarwater, that you'd like to add?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Same here. I'm good to go.
Great. Awesome. Well, with that, let's go into it. So next slide, I think I discussed that somewhat. We'll go through this, very quickly. Once again, this is kind of the filter slide that's shown kind of how we've worked through the process and all the advisory panels. As you know, we're kind of at the bottom of that, the last officially scheduled meeting. Go to the next slide. Once again, we're at meeting 5, and this will be the panel deciding the areas of focus and priorities, and that would eventually get communicated back up to the SPARC Executive Committee by the panel chairs. Next slide. Next slide. Just as a reminder again, because we wanted to make a point of it, the SPARC guiding principles, I won't go through them in detail. You've seen them ad nauseum. And the economic revitalization panel principles, just want to make sure that these are kind of top of mind for everyone as we work through the process. Next slide. Next slide. So once again, as I'd mentioned before, there's been kind of a lot of input that's built over the course of this process in terms of thinking about each one of the areas, to what extent to focus on each area, what program parameters could look like in order to think about ideas in each one of these areas. And so I'll go through some of those over the next few slides and just talk about the highlights, and then we'll get into the idea submissions themselves. Next slide. The hope coming out of today is to not only get a feel for the the high fit idea submissions and have a discussion around them, which ones are the ones that people think are on the panel. The panel's a group believes are worthy to go forward, but also beginning to think about, okay, what are the implications for that around the areas of strategic focus, and thinking about, okay, what might the allocation look like across each one of the areas. So that is part of the exercise today. As part of that, there are a couple top-down exercises that have been conducted. One had been conducted just getting the feel of the panelists around the relative importance of each area, and even some initial thoughts around funding envelopes. Once again, I'm sure that'll change based on looking what's bubbling up from the idea submissions, as well as the team had put together some thoughts about, if you think about each one of the areas, what might different dollar amounts of investment get you, really looking at kind of conventional interventions. So that really is just meant to be a thought starter exercise for you. The thing to keep in mind is when you look at the idea submissions, a lot of those ideas really aren't conventional interventions. So once again, take any thought exercises in here that are provided by the team, with a grain of salt. All it was meant to do was maybe to just give, a point of view or additional, point of guidance for the panel itself to think about. Next slide. So I'll spend a little bit of time on this. This is kind of reviewing the results of some of the work input that the panel itself had come forward with around thinking across these areas, around areas of relative importance. Once again, once you get into the idea submissions, may not look like this at all, and you may rethink all of this. But that 100-point exercise on that left column, that's kind of where things came out. And then in the homework, doing some ranking around these and just looking at the distributions, here's what came out of that. I think what you see from this is kind of, going into the discussion around the idea submissions, there are 4 or arguably 5 areas that were bubbling to the top in terms of the energy of the group, having gone through kind of a massive amount of data in discussion around economic revitalization over the course of this process. And there were a few that, for one reason or another, had less focus. So keep this in mind as we continue with the discussions as we go. Go to the next slide.
Hey, John, can I ask a quick question on the prior slide?
Go right ahead.
Can you explain a little bit more on the right column what those numbers mean? I know you said these were ranking of 1 to 8, with 8 is the highest.
Mm-hmm.
Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
In terms of when you look at the average
These were the panel's average rankings of all of the submissions within those categories.
No.
I'm trying to understand.
It was across the areas. It was saying if you looked at the areas, once again, like I said, this is just one data point. If you were going to prioritize the area, how would you prioritize it? And so the average, that's
that makes sense. I follow that. Thanks.
Once again, there's a bunch of different pieces of information. None of these are in and of themselves totally definitive of what the panel is thinking. So go to the next slide. So I'll spend a little bit of time on this, but if you look at the high fit idea submissions in the various program areas, the numbers that were determined high fit by at least one person who submitted, you come out with 170 high fit idea submissions, and we'll talk about those today. We also asked the panel that if there were some submissions that fell into other areas that hadn't been prioritized at this point, bring those forward, and we'll also be able to have a discussion around those. There were 3 of those that people had put forward. When we get to that part of the discussion, if people can think of other ones that they want to bring forward, kind of let us know, we can discuss. We don't want to kind of leave any ideas on the table that may be great ideas that may not have fit into one of these areas. When you look at the dollars associated with those high fit submissions, and once again, some of them were high, as you'll see, higher fit than others, because some of them, like 5 people thought they were, 7 people thought they were high fit, and then others, only one person did. But the panel will be able to discuss that today. But when you add up what all those submissions, the funding request total to, it's over 2.3 billion. So obviously, there's going to need to be discussion amongst the panel in order to identify, which ones really are rising to the top in the view of the panel. If you look at the columns to the right, this was asking the panel, apps and context around the idea submissions, how they might think about if you're going to ask for a minimum and target amount for each one of those areas and overall. What could it be if you looked in the median of the responses in aggregate across that? You know, the median of the minimum was 65.5. The median of the target was 415 million. Once again, during today, we're going to get down into the granular detail, and the panel itself is really going to build up what anything is in this area. But just wanted to kind of really report back to you kind of what came out of the homework.
Hey, Don,
Go right ahead.
this is
Yeah.
Sam again. I just had another, I guess, comment that I'll make on this.
Sure.
I'm not sure how other panelists approached this, but you know, when I was ranking my submissions on high as a high, I wasn't in all cases necessarily thinking that if it were solely up to me, I would necessarily fund those projects fully. I think that there are a lot of projects that seem to be maybe scalable in nature or could be scalable in nature and still be a significant benefit, but not necessarily come out with you know, such a high overall dollar associated with each one.
Yep, totally true. I think that should, when we get into the pieces that the chair is going to facilitate, I think all of those, you know, thoughts and concerns can come out for sure. Go to the next slide. You know, one thing to think about, and this might come, you know, in a discussion at the end once we get through all these discussions, is, you know, as you think about either the idea submissions or you think about funding envelopes, you know, you could approach this, you know, in two different ways, right? You know, the question is going to be, you know, do you want to kind of peanut butter across all the program areas, you know, or ideas that fall into all those areas, or do you want to just kind of select a fewer areas to really focus in on and kind of go deep on those? Once again, that'll be up to the panel at the end, just kind of pointing out that that is a consideration. You know, on the left provides the advantage of maybe more of a diversified portfolio. On the right could provide more of an advantage in terms of really getting heft in a few areas. So go to the next slide. You know, and I won't go into this in detail. This is theoretically how it could play out here, depending upon what the panel decided in terms of really focusing on a few areas as opposed to doing a little bit in several areas. Go to the next one. Okay, with that, I think I got through things fairly quickly. Let's kind of begin to dive in. Let me just kind of walk through one section illustratively, and then I promise I'm going to hand this over to the chairs very quickly. You know, here's the kind of program templates that we've been creating all along. All this is subject to change based on the discussions that happen here. So let's treat these as placeholders for this. Go to the next slide. We sent this out as a pre-read in each one of the areas, innovation, entrepreneurial ecosystem, the team to just provide some thoughts about, you know, maybe how to think about what you might be able to get with different scale of spending. You know, pick, you know, one or two interventions and said, you know, based on history or based on, you know, information even that was looking at averages and submissions, you know, here's to think about what you might be able to get out of a minimum ask or a target ask. Once again, this is just a what if and isn't meant to, you know, to be any form of a recommendation here, but just kind of put this in place for each one of these areas, just to provide an additional data point if helpful for the panel. You know, keep in mind, the one thing, the limitation I'd say of this is the fact that these tend to be kind of, you know, traditional interventions. And when you look at the range of what's in the idea submissions, for instance, in an area like housing, you know, your interventions could be anything from building a house to incenting people to build a house, to making strategic investments to the ecosystem, to making investments and finding different ways to build housing, right? So there are a bunch of different ways to skin the cat. And as we get into each area, I think that's really going to come across. So go to the next slide. So with this is where for each one of these discussions, TN and Representative Tarwater are going to lead the discussion. On the left is the program parameters that the panel had agreed on. On the right are the idea submissions, the dollars associated with them, the number of high fit ratings. To your point, Sam, around a lot of these, you might have liked the idea, but not necessarily at the funding level. There may be other considerations. For instance, there may be some things that the legislature in the area of housing is focusing on, or other contextual things that my guess is Representative Tarwater will know infinitely more than someone like I would. So I'm going to hand it over. The one thing I would just ask is Representative Tarwater and Tien, as you walk through this discussion, as you feel that you're getting to some closure around the idea submissions that the panel feels are the most important ones to move forward with, just let the team know, because we're going to try and work in the background to make sure that we're capturing those decisions based on what the panel is coming forward with. So with that, I am going to stop talking for the majority of this meeting. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, John, for that. And thanks for all the work that went into this. It looks like you guys, we thought we had a lot of homework, but you had to review all of our homework. And so we really appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. And I know J.R. Clays is on here today. I know he's listening. He is on the conference committee for the appropriations process. And so he'll know quite a bit more about what's already been funded out of all this and what hasn't been. But I do know that several of these submissions have been funded in the appropriations process this year. And recently the dairy farm just got what they were needing to break ground, and that's going to be really big for the rural areas of Kansas, the dairy farm, cheese farm thing. And so I know that was a submission in here for $70 million. It wasn't really something that anybody really bubbled to the top, it doesn't look like, but that's just an example of some of the things that have gone on. And as you know, we're down to $400 and some million left in the funds for the Spark Committee. Even though the Spark Committee was to be the ones that divided these monies up, somehow people have found ways around that process. So I'd like JR to weigh in when we start talking about some certain things that might have already been funded, if that's okay. And we can open it up for discussion. Our goal here is to try to come up with certain ideas that are catalytic and can catapult Kansas into the future, make some good recommendations. And then once we have several ideas that we think can be funded, then we can put those into the proper categories so that we, rather than just saying for innovation, we want to spend $100 million, we'd like to say we'd like to fund these specific projects for this much, rather than have the executive committee have to relook through all of these and figure out what we were thinking when we wanted to fund innovation for $100 million. And so with that, I can open up for anybody that wants to talk about any general ideas that, or not general ideas, but specific projects that they thought were going to be catalytic. Well, that was easy.
Sean, do we want to start with different categories first? That way, I'm assuming everybody has their Excel spreadsheet pulled up that they submitted, and that way we could sort by categories and high priorities and hit each programmatic areas first. So do we want to discuss innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem first and then get to the other categories? Or I'm open to starting with housing and development or anything else. And then
I think that would be a good idea, Tien. Keep in mind though that some of these that are on here may not specifically fall into one of the 4 or 5 categories that we identified, but they might still be good ideas. And so we want to make sure that we get those out as well. But if we go to the Excel spreadsheet, if you all have that in front of you, we can start with the 4A tab on the scoring.
And just to let
what is
and just for the panel members to know, and I'm speaking just for myself here, a win for me would be we go through all these programmatic areas and there's a short list of finalists that myself and Sean would have to go, and whoever would love to participate in the process, because I know your commitment technically ends after today's meeting, but would help us with, along with the staff, on further due diligence of vetting this so that we can have a recommendation to the executive committee on Monday. So if we can walk out of here with all those categories and there's a short list of 3 to 5 or whatever that appropriate number would be, that would be greatly appreciated. And I know we got a tall order in front of us because that's a lot of work to do in 2 hours.
Does everybody have the Excel spreadsheet in front of them?
Yes.
So let's just start with the 4A meeting business category, which would be the top 30 some. Yeah, there's like 30 some business. Go ahead.
Yeah, the first one for me was number 11, was underneath Enterprise KC. They were asking for $78 million in regards to cybersecurity center of excellence in the greater KC area. For me, I mean, obviously 78 million is a big ask, but I would love to at least somehow move this to the short list or discuss it and get more details about what the private sector is adding here to this, along with what the local municipalities in the city, county, or other areas that might be impacting this, to see how collectively we can fund $78 million or whatever dollar amount we think is needed there. I like this because it's a new industry for us, but I'm hoping somebody on here has more subject matter expertise of just the dire need for cybersecurity and how Kansas can be a player in it.
Okay, yeah, I know there were 2 or 3 cybersecurity related submissions, and it is something that Kansas is wanting to focus on. I know that the Lieutenant Governor, it's high on his list. Does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, I had also flagged that one as high. And I'll be the first to admit, this is not necessarily my area of expertise. This is an example maybe of, and $78 million, right, is a pretty significant amount out of the total funds available. So I'm always going to kind of preface mine with a caveat around maybe scalability of some of these. And I'm not suggesting that a very high amount of funding is not warranted in a situation. I just want to be aware of how quickly we can consume the entire pot of money just with a couple of projects.
Is Matt on?
I received a text from Matt. He unfortunately is on an airplane right now. He said he would send a few ideas by email to us when he got a chance today.
Representative Tarwater, do you mind if I make one comment on that?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
This is Greg Orman, by the way. I spent a fair amount of time talking to the folks about that project, and their initial ask, believe it or not, was for $10 million. Ultimately, they ended up scaling it up because they looked at the size of what they perceived to be the spark dollars available and said, what are we going to really need to take this to the end game? And so I would suggest a couple of things. One is you could certainly advance this proposal to Spark with a range of funding, and my suspicion is the Enterprise KC people would be happy to get started if it did look like it was going to consume too many of the dollars you have available. Second thing I would say is I do think this is a high fit for Kansas, in large part because one of the challenges I think we have as a state is figuring out how to keep our retired military personnel who retire here in the state. And I think cybersecurity is sort of a natural career evolution for a lot of folks who go through our various military institutions here. So I would support the idea that this is a high fit, but I would also note that you probably have a range of funding available to you that would be impactful.
Okay, Greg. Yeah, thanks for that input. And I would say that would apply to any of these submissions, that we would bubble the submissions up and ask for scalability. I have met with this company several times on and off through the last several years. I also had this one flagged, and I had it flagged because I like the evergreen aspect of this, where they as they receive revenue, they put it back into the fund to fund more businesses. And so that was one of my goals going into this overall process, was to try to figure out a way to capture the revenues that would be generated back to Kansas and refold them back into a process so that we could continue to do a Spark type process every year. And this company is kind of doing that on their own. So I did have this one flagged as well. Anybody else? Anybody have an issue with putting this on a list to look at with scalability? Okay, seeing none, we'll mark that one. Is there anything else under the business category that anyone wants to talk about? Sam, I hate to put you on the spot here, but I had the Spirit flagged for the aerospace defense systems, kind of along the same lines there. New industry to Kansas. We're a world leader in aviation, and I would like to capitalize on that. Can you share with us some of that aspect?
Yeah, I can. Since you asked, I do want to be, aware of my role on this panel, right? And I've kind of tried to separate myself from my employer's request in this. So certainly will recuse myself from any vote pertaining to this. But I'm happy to try to answer questions as best I can. And I think that's what I hear you saying, Representative Tarwater, is kind of asking for a little bit of explanation. So I think this is around, this request is around an opportunity for the effort to diversify the portfolio within the aerospace industry. There's a significant opportunity with a classified program around, also on the defense side, and the number of jobs that would be created as a long-term sustaining is a significant number, as you can tell in the application. This is for something that is not I would say, there's typical programs that maybe are more traditional in nature. This is one that is not your traditional program, but it has the opportunity for really being a gateway into numerous other projects that are of a caliber that we haven't really seen in the state very much. So we are very excited about this opportunity. Again, we're very limited in what we can say, just because it's a classified program. We're not even allowed at this point to disclose the customer. But this is definitely a gateway project that would involve the need for training employees to do and operate with processes that aren't necessarily happening today.
So Sam, question on this. This isn't an investment into infrastructure or FF&E. This is $8 million is purely used for human capital of training and skill set upgrading and things like that.
I don't have the project in front of me, Tim, but yeah, I think it was a variety of needs, including specialized training, but there were also some infrastructure portions of this related to some specialized equipment that does not exist today, that it's needed. So when you're building out, for example, an infrastructure required for highly classified projects, there has to be a hardening of your facility where those happens, and specialized IT infrastructure involved in that. And this is involved in setting up some of that, as well as some of the training portions that are required for bringing on employees into a program like this.
Can you help me understand? I mean, obviously we have a presence from the private business jet industry and part commercial here in Wichita. but what percentage of the defense budget do we tap into, and how could this lead to us diversifying a little bit more into the defense side of aerospace for our state?
Yeah, great question. I think every program and opportunity is unique. I think that the way that we view this is there's definitely an opportunity here for the regional supply chain, and I believe that was outlined as part of the submission in terms of sustaining impact for regional suppliers here in Kansas associated with this. I think this one was, again, a 350 job sustained project, meaning, right, that's not just a ramp up, but that there would be 350 jobs sustained on this. And the nature of this type of work, Tien, is such that if there's success winning this project, that it would be catalytic in terms of bringing similar defense type work to the region.
Can you give me and the panels like a 30,000 foot deal of, hey, we spend $4 billion in defense, and the state of Kansas currently right now has less than 1% of it with these types of investments, we can grow that? I mean, what part of the pie do we have when it comes to defense budget?
Yeah, I can't speak from the state as a whole. I don't know that number, Tien. I mean, I think that's something that we could probably work maybe with the Department of Commerce to get that number. I know that for Spirit and our supply chain, diversification is extremely important. We saw that over, right, what happened on the commercial side leading up to the pandemic, and then certainly the pandemic and its impact on commercial aerospace. And there's a recognition from, a state level all the way down to regionally in the Wichita area of the need for diversification. Diversifying into defense is one of those categories that can help weather those up and down trends on commercial aerospace side. And so this is one of those opportunities that, it's not talking about tapping into a program that has a short flash life, but this has a long-term sustaining opportunity for job creation in the region.
Thank you, Sam.
So, did anyone else flag this?
I flagged this high.
The reason I did was because, and there were a couple of aviation ones in here that I liked, including the UAV program. Kansas is the world leader in aviation, and slowly and surely we're losing that market share to other states, including Oklahoma, including Spirit. So until the governor signs a tax credit bill that we just sent her, Kansas has not been real favorable to aviation in relation to our surrounding states, or at least Oklahoma and in a few other states that are taking all of our jobs. So now that we are going to be competitive as far as the aviation industry, I'd like to recapture those employees that have moved out of state and bring them back to the state and give them good training and recapitalize that market. But that's just me. Does anybody have anything to say about this submission?
Which number was that?
25.
I'm all for making this, having this submission on the short list for us to do further due diligence. I mean, we still need to find out further what the city, the county, and Spirit's doing in regards to matching funds or their investment in this as well. But I'm all for exploring this further.
I would agree with Tien on that.
Okay. Does anybody have an issue with it? Seeing none, is there anything else under the business category, which would be through number 30?
I had 2 items marked on my end. The KU Innovation Park, submission number 21. I think some of this received funding already through the state legislative sessions. Sean, can you help give some insight on that? This is their Bioinnovation and Sustainability Center they wanted to build.
Yes, that's number, which one is that?
21. It was a $52.8 million ask. It was submitted by the KU Innovation Park.
Okay, that was one several of us flagged because it ended up in the slide presentation here. JR could probably comment more on funding to date. I know we did fund something at KU.
We did.
It wasn't this.
This isn't it. No, there was
I didn't-
35 million that was direct appropriated in the budget. This is a separate item.
Okay. Yeah, this is another one of those projects that would be evergreen. They need this money to complete a certain phase of their project. And then once this is completed, this is one of the things we talked about early on with the professors getting grants for research, but not really being real good business people. This program kind of pairs up the research with business people and starts businesses. They're highly successful. They came in this year and presented to the Commerce Committee, and they seem to have this figured out. And they started several companies that have grown to over 200 employees, and they'll continue to do that by building this building out. They will be able to self-fund 3 more buildings after this to continue to grow that campus. It's a pretty neat deal that's right next to the university. It's tied to the university, but it isn't actually the university.
Does anybody have any additional intel on this project?
Representative, if I could comment on it, I've spent a little time with them on this project as well. I think specifically what they're looking to do is build out more wet lab space.
Yep.
And also build larger spaces. And I think the concern they have is they've got their 2 buildings already. They've got another under construction. And the challenge is, as these companies that they're helping to incubate grow, they're concerned that if they don't have the space for them, that they ultimately leave the area, potentially leaving the state altogether. So I think part of this also is an effort on their part to create a migration path for businesses that they incubate as they grow to be able to stay in the Kansas community.
Thanks, Greg.
Maybe this is a question for Greg or Senator Clays. Do we know like how this project submission stacked up to the funding that KU did receive through the state?
Sure, happy to answer that. So the project that was put in through the budget with a direct appropriation was more for a convention center project that would be on the main campus. I would note in this project, the state does lease space. KDOT engineers are there, which then is intended to amplify an engineering presence in the state. But yeah, the project's completely separate. There's no tie-in whatsoever between these 2.
Yeah, it's starting to come back to me now, JR. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
The appropriation had to do with, I think, trying to help expand their football field as well, or their football stadium.
Yeah, it ties into the new stadium center, and then there's a convention center portion to that is attached. I don't know how much of that's like public, but it became public during that process.
Does anyone have any issues getting more information from this company and keeping it on the list?
I would like to keep it on the list.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea. So JR, Can you explain the base? You're kind of involved with the base stuff. Can you tell me where we are on all that? Because a lot of these, as you said before, are on base and on this. You know where we are on funding that stuff?
Right, and that might be a question for staff as well over in Commerce. I do know that all of the submissions from my region receive rejection letters from base, so they must have come up with what that list looks like. And if that is the case, then perhaps we should have staff go through and pull all of the items that receive base grants but also applied for Spark out of this, or at least flag those for us. So that we're not going through a duplicative process here. The base grants, I think, were a fantastic idea, and I kind of like how those submissions went with a couple of guardrails up. It really honed in where we could maximize where some of these dollars are spent, because it did put a cap of 25 million, and it also required matches, which the Spark, as you can see, you could just ask for whatever you want. But that process had $100 million, I believe, allocated to it originally, and obviously very limited when you look at some of the dollar asks that are in here for what could be funded. So it's understandable not everything was, but if something did receive funding or partial funding, I do think we should have that flagged in here before we get really far down the road on these. And I think one of the asks on here also is for base grant expansion, as you just brought up, adding another 200 million to the base grants, which I'm not opposed to that idea either.
Okay. Any other submissions under the business category?
I had one more. It was submission number 15, submitted by Groover Labs, Inc. This is also another cybersecurity technology project. And so it was more in line of the one that was proposed by Enterprise KC, had a $2.3 million ask, working with the Virginia-based company to bring some of its, critical capabilities and ecosystem here to our state. And so for me, it was kind of back to like, hey, need more details on the investment from the city, county, Groover Labs, and also the company from Virginia called Nomadics. And so I thought if we were going to make ourselves a cybersecurity play, having hubs in the greater Kansas City area and something in Wichita, the largest city in the state, might be some just, general synergies there. Wanted permission to explore that further.
Yeah, I had that flag too, just simply because it was cybersecurity. My only concerns was it is an out-of-state hub or out-of-state mother business, I guess, and I'd like the funds and the revenues, the future revenues, to stay in the state. So if we got more information on how that would work, that would be probably a good thing. Greg, did you happen to meet with this company at all? You may not be there anymore.
I will comment, Groover Labs is a local company. Obviously, they're collaborating with a Virginia-based company, but we can definitely look at that in regards to further due diligence, making sure that the dollars stay within our state. But yes, I would agree. I wouldn't want to ship any of our funds out of state by any means.
Okay, anybody have an issue with getting more information on that, keeping it on a list?
No, I don't have an issue. I had flagged it also as a high one.
I'd be interested to know where it's located as well.
Groover Labs is in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, thanks.
The other one we haven't talked about that I saw had ranked was the Network Kansas proposal.
What number was that?
24.
Lana, I had also flagged it.
Okay, Lana, you want to go ahead and proceed?
Well, Network Kansas, is I guess quasi-governmental, right? But has done a lot to support entrepreneurial efforts throughout the state, and in my opinion, are one of the agencies that does the best job of addressing both rural and urban needs with their dollars. So, and I'm supportive of this request, but like I said, I just noticed that it had kind of risen to the top on that first screen that John shared with us. So I felt like maybe other people wanted to talk about it also.
I think several of us flagged this one as high, and I mean, during this entire process, we talked about new business startups for the most part. And so I wouldn't have any problems with this one being on the list. Would anybody have any issues with this? Okay, any other under business?
I'm curious from the panel, Representative Tarwater, if anyone else had flagged any of the, some of these were lower dollar amounts, but there was one for submitted, it was number 9 by the Topeka Latino Professionals Association. And then there was one number 29, Sevenfold by Hutton. And then also another lower dollar one, Empower Evergreen, number 26. Curious to know, did anybody else flag any of those?
Sam, I had all 3 of those as medium on mine, but not open to discussing it if you have any insight.
I think I just want to be aware as we're, selecting projects that we think about the different factors that go into, our mandate for looking at projects. So thinking about coverage for the full state as best we can, that we're making sure that we're thinking about various populations, and urban, rural. So if we've got items concentrated in some of these categories, more in urban settings, are we missing any opportunities for some more rural projects?
Lana, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate those comments from Sam. I think that is super important that we're paying attention to what we're serving. I guess I wouldn't have any problem with sending some of these smaller ones up as projects that we feel we could get behind if the committee determines that that's an opportunity to do that. Yeah, I think obviously my community is largely immigrant and newcomer populations, and they are extremely good entrepreneurs and do a tremendous job of starting and building businesses. So I would agree with Sam that I'm absolutely supportive of making sure that we're shifting funding out. And some of these smaller ones, I think to Sam's point, some of these smaller ones maybe didn't excite the panelists as much. We just maybe felt like it was a smaller impact because they were smaller amounts that were being requested. But I would have to agree with Sam that some of these smaller ones may not seem huge in the scheme of things, but for certain populations, they will absolutely be impactful.
And I think that kind of comes back to a comment that I made in a prior meeting where, there are some projects that just really stand out because of their size and their scope. And I think it's, fully appropriate that we pursue those, but there's some probably pockets within our communities where a smaller dollar amount would still have a significant impact for the communities and the constituencies that they serve, and they're innovative in nature. So I just want to be thinking about maybe some smaller dollar opportunities as well. Does anyone know anything about number 22, Meade County Incubators?
Meade County is nearby. They're doing some fun stuff. They're really trying to get a little more creative in how they attract folks to their communities, and they have a few little cities within the county, and in each of them has been working on how they could, get some older stock housing back in to the market and those kinds of things. I struggle with incubators just as a general rule. I don't find them to be tremendous assets to the business ecosystem unless they are really, really targeted and pretty much rifle focused. Unfortunately, most of them are shotgun approaches. So I'm not a huge incubator fan, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be worth looking at it further to see if there's some opportunities to get into one of those.
I mean, I definitely, me personally, I see a lot of benefits in investing in the Latino community since there are growing workforce numbers for us. I had these projects, Sam, that you brought up marked as medium, but completely open to the discussion that we're having. And if we need to mark any of them specifically as a high priority for us to go get further due diligence on. I even made note on the Topeka project if there was other best practices that was happening that this was mirroring off of for us to continue to invest in.
Of the ones mentioned, the only one I had flagged was the Sevenfold by Hutton, just because I know they would probably do a good job of putting together a good group of advisors to help small businesses. But that was the only one I had flagged, but that doesn't mean the other ones shouldn't be on the list.
On Sevenfold by Hutton, due to its dollar amount, and I think part of it too for us, and I said this from our very first meeting, was we got to invest in great ideas, but we also have to invest in the people that are executing those ideas that have a successful track record, right? Because you could have an amazing business plan and flop because you're not the right executor. And Sevenfold by Hutton, by all means, here would be a great executor just because of their proven track record. So I'm definitely open to moving that to high and exploring that further, especially since they're asking for less than $500,000 here. I don't want us to get nickeled and dime left and right, but from a pure workforce and skill up for small businesses ecosystem, I think this would be something that would be good for us to explore further.
And I guess I would maybe add to that. I support that as well. I think that the number 9 and 26 for that kind of focused more on some of the Hispanic community, one in Topeka and one in Wichita. Again, I think that those maybe are lower dollar opportunities that could highlight some of the diversity of impact for funding that we might want to explore further as well.
Does anybody know anything about the Empire Evergreen, or should we could just request information from them? All right, so is there any objection for the number 9 and number 26 and then the Sevenfold being added to the list?
Yeah, it was 9, 26, and 29, I believe we were going to do further diligence on. Just want to make sure we clarify that so the staff can mark everything appropriately.
Okay. Anything else under business? I think we pretty much have them all on the list at this point.
How many total have we flagged in this conversation?
Like 8.
We've
I
flagged
expect,
8.
I think I've got 8, but I bet staff could tell us.
That's what it looks like on the screen on the filter.
Yeah, there should be 8.
I would expect the business one and workforce one to be kind of heavy and infrastructure to be lower. And so I was expecting quite a bit off this first one. Anything else under business? We can move on to workforce and workforce development. Does anyone have anything flagged under workforce? Nobody flagged anything under under workforce?
Does anyone have any more information on number 46?
I know some people that might, but I don't have anything off the top of my head. I know the chairwoman of the social services budget.
Yeah, and I would just say, Sam, one of the other groups I'm serving with is the Future Fellows group out of KU Center for Public and Policy Research. And certainly a lot of the data we're showing would suggest that this is going to be a huge concern for Kansas as we continue to go forward, not only the mental health side, but obviously just basic medical care. We're seeing those numbers decline pretty significantly, especially as we see retirements and so forth. So if we were going to be supportive of workforce stuff, this is probably an area we haven't really as a state focused on as much maybe as we could have.
It jumped out to me. I had flagged it as high, not because I know a lot about it, but I know that mental health is a big issue in the state, and it was a relatively low dollar request. But I don't think I would carry this by myself. I was just curious, if anybody else had insights into this.
Yeah, and I don't on this specific request, but certainly know that we're going to have continued issues in that realm for sure.
I'm just kind of wondering why it ended up in our committee. I guess it was just because it was a recruitment program for workforce.
I don't know. That might be something John should weigh in on.
I think it's likely they self-selected this particular area.
I know that we have focused in the appropriations process this year quite a bit on hospitals and healthcare, mental health especially. And JR, I think, is on here. He's no longer in his office. I think he's in his car. I don't know if you can speak up or not.
Yeah, I can. I don't have any intel on this one.
Okay. We could certainly request information for you, Sam, so we can look at it. What number was that?
That was number, 46.
Just real quick as a time check, we're at the halfway point. The thing I'd say though is we can certainly go over if the need be. So.
Okay, we're almost done with the first tab. And anybody else have anything under the workforce area? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So we can move to the 4B tab. What's the first one here?
Let's do housing, knock that out.
Okay.
Right, Lana?
Right. This is Lana.
Okay. Lana, you want to go first in housing?
Sure, I can go first. Give me just one.
I think most of us had the 3D
Sorry.
printer. The 3D
Yeah.
concrete printer was one of the ones I think most people flagged.
Yeah, so we've done a ton of work on this, and actually we're able to partner with one of our housing nonprofits to apply for some of the community service tax credits to help fund the 3D printer. Our goal is to prove the concept, and we have a housing development set aside in Holcomb, which is the only other incorporated community in Finney County. And the idea being that we would start with some rentals that would, again, just prove the concept of the 3D printing and show the different things that we can do with it. They don't just have to look like a concrete box, if you will. And then there's actually the developer who owns the rest of that land really wants to utilize the printer to do custom homes on the remainder of that housing development. So we would get the opportunity to show that, yes, it works for rapid construction for rental type units, but also has a place in building custom homes that obviously are very, very well built. They're basically a masonry home without brick layers and block layers, right? So that's where we are on that. Cobod, so far, the printers that we have found have all been Scandinavian, mostly Danish. Cobod is the company that we felt the most comfortable with. And Representative Tarwater, I sent you the information that we got from them just this weekend when we asked for some updates. So when we first started having these discussions, the 3D printer was new enough that we weren't sure that it was something we wanted to be a pioneer in. But the technology has just been very, very rapid in that realm. And we're seeing more and more things, become available in, again, in the types of construction and really even in the material utilized. Or initially, it was a very specialized formula. Now we've got it down to where, local concrete companies can be a part of providing those raw materials. It's just a matter of blending and mixing in the necessary pieces to it. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Lana, can you give some insight to, like, for example, a $200,000 home would normally take 8 months to construct, and with the 3D printer, we could do the exact same home for $100,000, and it would take us 3 months.
Yeah, so pricing is a little bit of a challenge to really hammer out right now. We've had some test homes built. I've actually got a request in to go to Virginia Tech to look at some stuff that they just did. Their university funded a really cool partnership to really look at what those cost savings are and labor savings. Because it's not just cost, obviously it's labor as well. And to your point, time is a value, right? What we know as far as the time goes, what we have looked at are like a 1,400 square foot home is what really we've seen done pretty regularly. And those can be printed in 24 hours of print time. And you're pretty much ready to set trusses and go with your trades on the inside within 48 hours. So that concrete, because of the specialized mixture, is setting as it goes. And if you've watched any of the 3D printing technology for housing, you assume, you think of concrete and you think it's just going to run, but it doesn't, because it's got this fixative in it that's actually allowing it to build and start curing as it goes. So time, huge savings. Money, we really can't definitively answer how much it saves. We know it's not more than traditional wood frame construction, but we don't know how much those savings could be until we really get into a larger scale of utilizing it.
So what all does this eliminate? It eliminates the framer, eliminates the sheetrocker, but I mean, you still got to have your electricians, your plumbers and stuff in there, right? And those other
Yep.
skills.
Yeah, and you can actually, I mean, there's other ways that you can go with this, but there's been some test cases done where they actually go in and texture the walls, the interior walls, so that you actually are just leaving the concrete as the finish. But certainly the other model on this is that you just print the exterior and then you go in and continue, do traditional framing on the interior walls and actually fur out, if you will, the interior of the exterior wall as well. So there's a multitude of ways it can be done. You can design the concrete to look a certain way. We've seen some where they've got it looking like brick or looking like masonry, or even some kind of a trowel design. So it really, again, lends itself to that more custom design type stuff. But if we're looking at just the efficiency and economy of quick build for rental housing, it's a far better alternative than the traditional mobile home. That would be the other quick route to housing. And certainly in our in our state, where we do have pretty significant severe weather opportunities, I think it's a better alternative from that standpoint. But from the county government side, it's a far better option because it is real property that we're valuing. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it if we can make it work across the state. Mm-hmm.
I think that labor is a huge issue, especially in rural Kansas, and I think this might be a great way to cut a lot of the labor out.
Yeah, we would agree with that.
For some reason on my spreadsheet here, I have it marked as low, but I know that I have it marked as high on my notes. So my apologies when I sent this in. But yeah, no, I think, well, I requested information from you this weekend because I knew that it was going to be a winner. But anybody have any other questions for her at this point?
I would support it. I had marked it as high, and I don't know if we need to punt to another discussion and close this one out, but I noticed number 29 is also a 3D concrete printer project from Meade County Economic Development Committee. Relatively low dollar, it looks like a 1.25 million request. I would also be supportive of looking at that one as well. A couple different areas in the state where we could maybe invest in some of this technology.
I would concur on both.
Sam, this is Andrew David, Apologies Committee. I just jumped on from a city council meeting, but so I've just got the second half of this conversation, but I know I scored them, those 3D printed projects all highly. I thought there was a third maybe, but maybe I'm confused.
Yeah, I thought there was a third in Salina too, or am I making that up? My wires could be crossing here.
What number is the one in Salina?
Oh, I don't remember. For some reason, I didn't mark it high either. I can go back.
I think it's in McPherson. There was one in McPherson.
But I'm definitely all for exploring all the 3D printers in greater detail. And then just like high level discussion on affordable. I mean, so we see tons of projects too about, hey, can we help offset this to build X amount of homes or rental properties and things like that in these neighborhoods? I still think there we as stewards of this would warrant some kind of conversation of how can we pool our resources together with ARPA funds to, if I know this doesn't address labor issues, but could it help address buying power if we were to help buy some of these raw materials for these general contractors to go into these communities that need this? So I don't know how we would go about that, but that'd be something I'm open to exploring as well. A co-op of some sort.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Tian. Again, I have no expertise in this, but it would seem to me like if we could invest in something that would facilitate infrastructure in order for like a co-op or buying power opportunity for multiple communities. And then we're not necessarily picking winners and losers. We're saying the whole of the state, for anybody that wants to participate, can leverage some of those cost savings for projects.
Agreed. Lana, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are some opportunities, probably to facilitate some of that. We happen to have a very active builders association because that was one of our focuses, and we got that really rejuvenated. One of the challenges we'll have really is getting, the communities linked into that, if you will, if they don't have that builders association. And I can tell you right now, west of Salina, we're pretty much the only one that's actually active and able to put together some of that. So yes, I think it's worth exploring. I'm not sure how easy it will be to execute, but certainly I'm willing to have everybody look into it.
We could certainly make a note that we want to look into that and have a legislative panel assembled to figure out a good way to leverage that. But, I think it's just a supply and demand issue, and the more money that we put into buying materials for people, the higher the rates will go. But that's just, I do a little construction, and I can tell you, as these monies come from the government, we're still seeing the impact from things like what we're doing right now with the Spark Committee. People are building things on government dollars, and they're paying whatever they need to for the materials, without regard for profit, because the government's there to help them. And so we're spiking the building materials every time we put more money into these markets, which is why I like that, which is why I like to do the 3D printing, because it's a whole new concept. And if we could prove that, that could be catalytic.
Yeah, and I think to Tian and Sam's comments, what they're talking about is really more a cooperative of private buyers.
Yeah.
The government wouldn't fund the purchase. It would enable the vehicle that would allow them to form a buyer's cooperative, if you will. And I think there is some value in that. Again, it's going to be a matter of getting out to the folks who aren't connected to the system in any way, but doesn't mean we couldn't do it.
Yeah, it'd be good to see the smaller mom and pop organizations that run to Home Depot and Lowe's every day to purchase materials. It'd be good to see them.
Agreed. That was one of the things, when we built the transload facility here, that was one of the things that we were focused on was, now we have the capacity to bring full unit trains in. Let's get lumber from new markets. Let's introduce some new competitors to the market. So we certainly have part of the infrastructure in place. It would just be a matter of really putting together the vehicle that would allow people to join up and be a part of that buying group.
Yeah, I think of it as, like Lana said, it's not the using the funds to go and purchase materials. It's using the funds to set up kind of the infrastructure necessary for the supply chain management. It's like the buyer. How do you negotiate prices and coordinate multiple projects at a time in order to make fewer purchases, but you get better price out of those. And I don't know if other states are doing this. It may be a model that exists somewhere that we could see as a best practice and try to replicate something, but that's, to everybody's point, I think it's going to take a little bit of research and digging into to see what that might look like.
I'm happy to do some checking if that would be helpful. I work closely with the National Association of Home Builders, so they may very well be aware of some of those buying groups that are taking place. If you'd like, Representative Tarwater, I'm happy to look into that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. And we'll make a note to put that in there, and we'll get a little more information before we make the presentation. But I think you're onto something there. But before we move on, we talked about a few other things. So we've got the research that we're going to do, and I can get research involved in that, Lana, with you at the state level. But we also had 3 different areas of 3D printing. How do you want to handle that? Do you want to put all of those on the list, or one of them, or 2 of them? Any input there?
I think
we
they're
put all
all 3. Yeah. I agree. I'd support that. They're low enough dollar.
Okay. What were the three numbers, just so that we can get that?
Number 6, number 29. And then I thought there was a third one, but I can't seem to find it. If we do, we'll circle back. I can't identify that right now.
Tian, this is Andrew. I brought that up too. I was just scrolling through my list and I reordered them, so I don't think my numbers match up to y'all's, but I could have swore there was a third one too, and I can't find it either. I did mark the Dodge City and the other one both high, but I can't find, I don't know why I wouldn't have marked the third one high, so I'll look for it.
Well, let's stick with the two anyway for now.
There is number 54 that does mention 3D printing in the description. I'm just wondering if that was the one that you're thinking of.
Let me get there. Of course, Lana gets her project on the short list and she leaves us.
That's how it works.
Yeah, 54 mentions 3D printing as well. It's talking about printing 1-bedroom homes for $15,000 up to $50,000 for a 4-bedroom home.
I did see that one, and it, I struggle with those numbers. Yeah, I struggle a lot with the numbers that they reference. I'm not sure how fact-based those are, but
Okay.
certainly could be looked at.
This is an individual applying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chairman, I remember that as well. Now I struggle with that. I guess my advocation would be, if we're kind of looking in the vein of more information, let's throw that in there, because to me, it's the concept. It's the concept of, we're encouraging a new type of construction with these funds in our state, and more refinement needs to be had about the particulars of that application and that project. But the overall construct, I think, is a good one, and spreads it across the state.
thank you guys. I'm sorry I have to bug out.
Thank you, Lana. Appreciate all your input today and just through all the meetings.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 more that I wanted to raise as a question.
Okay. Before you go, Sam, I think Senator Clays is in a pocket now where he can speak, and I think he's got one. Jay, are you there? Or do we need to wait? Okay, we'll move on. We'll come back to Senator Clays after Sam. Go ahead, Sam. Sorry about that.
All right, and Senator Clays, if you're available, you can interrupt me and I'll just pause and then pick back up. I wanted to flag 2 for quick discussion that I had noted, numbers 37 and 51. 37, they both seemed kind of interesting to me. 37 was clear to say that this is not a mobile home, but it's a modular housing initiative. I'm curious if anyone else looked at that one and what their thoughts were. And then number 51, I thought was an innovative idea. It's not 3D printing, but it looks like it sounds from the description, we're given limited information, but it sounds like they've engaged with local officials, and there may be some local official regional support for this, of being able to manufacture precast concrete panels for home build. Again, it would be another in-state project where they are producing materials necessary for homes. That's a relatively low dollar one, $450,000 request. So I thought that it deserved at least a conversation.
Sam, I did have 51 marked to medium to get more intel, but you're right, based on the insight, and I probably should have given more weight to it, since it's a non-traditional method, so could potentially provide some innovation for us to solve our housing problem for sure. I would be all for exploring that further. What was the other number, Sam?
The other was number 37.
Oh, the modular home.
Yeah. Again, it's not for every community and every part, but I'm just wondering if there's any merit to this. And again, I'll defer to others with more expertise in this, but it sounded like kind of an outside of the box approach. And this may be a project that has scalability as well. So, for a smaller amount, could they do more of a pilot project?
So it looks, is your understanding the main structure is containers? I'm reading the description again. It looks like shipping containers.
Yeah, that was listed as one of the items that they would do. Sizes range from studio to multi-room living spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like double, and I hate to use this because it's mobile home terminologies. I don't want to offend anybody in the modular side, but I've seen like 4 shipping containers put together and made into a home. I mean, there's pockets of apartments here in Wichita made of shipping containers that were really cool. Matter of fact, our real estate division in our investment group even looked at constructing some of this. So we have a little bit of knowledge on it. It was very cost effective. Right now in the interim, there's a huge surplus, obviously, of ship containers everywhere. So they're being used left and right for different projects. Eventually that would be tapped out. But yeah, I think that would something we could explore further, unless somebody has a strong opinion otherwise.
I'd like to get more information from the company as far as what Kansas would receive out of this, because it appears that we would be building a factory for them or funding a factory to build these structures. And so would they be sold at a discounted rate, or would they just receive all the revenues going forward after we made an investment to help their business build a factory?
Yeah, 100% support more due diligence on this. And I'm certainly not saying that I would put my name as saying that I would advocate that we fund this. It's more just like I think that there's maybe some more due diligence that could be done, and it could be a project that I would be excited about.
All right, Senator Clays, are you available yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in a position to speak now if you'd like me to talk about number 5.
Okay. You have the floor,
So-
sir.
Yeah, thank you. So number 5 is an ask from the city of Salina, and I just wanted to flag it for everyone. I'm happy to do this the same way that the Hillmar Cheese project was done, through a direct appropriation. It does have a jobs component to it. The Hillmar project had about 200 jobs linked to it, and a requirement for those jobs to receive the funds through that direct appropriation. And this project has a 500 jobs requirement on it, or it's linked to at least 500 jobs that would come to the Salina area. It's supported by the 4 major employers in the area who would also have skin in the game on this project. So the number, while it's at 65 million, we believe that it could be done for closer to 25 million in the phases that are necessary to bring the housing here that would support those jobs. The employers involved are Kubota, Schwann's, One Vision, and a company whose name escapes me right now. But those employers would have some skin in the game on that project, and I would like to flag it for at least a partial funding, or if the direction from the task force panel here is to go the direct appropriation route like the Hillmar project, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay, so you'd be able to get us more information as far as what the participation would be from the city and from
Yeah.
companies
and-
that would be benefiting.
And yeah, and that's why that process with having a jobs requirement on it makes a lot more sense. It does require their skin in the game going through that appropriations process. But if we were also to do it through this, that'd be fine too. I don't think there's any difference in how it would be operated. But those employers have those jobs linked to that. Schwann's is in the middle of a major expansion. And Kubota just bought a large factory that they're using about a third of right now and would like to use more, but we just don't have the houses to support the people that it would take to fill all of the jobs that are available here. We're looking at about 1,600 actual jobs that are coming online over the next 4 years. And as you can see in this ask, it's about 1,800 housing units that would be at I-135 and Magnolia Road, in a very large development that would include a YMCA satellite. So that's the size and scope of the project. It's pretty massive. They're getting some finalized numbers right now from the developer so they can understand a little better what the ask is of the employers, so we can get their input into this. But I think the partial funding in the $20 to $25 million range will get us a long way towards getting that project accomplished. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. And if it can be on the list, that'd be great. If you prefer I go through the direct appropriation process like Delmar, I'm again happy to do that too.
So I wouldn't have a problem doing both, Senator. I know you may know more about the huge housing bill that's coming through the pipeline right now.
Right.
I don't know. Would something like this be in that, or could it be in that?
Yeah, it's a more of an inch deep, mile wide process through those housing projects. That's maneuvering a few units in a few specific areas to address housing needs. Because this has an economic development argument, it fits a little better into the ARPA funding. But those things really require Spark/ARPA is more about infrastructure unless you have that economic development argument. I would prefer not to compete with small communities that are seeking dollars to build a few houses here and there to address some pretty severe needs when they are trying to recruit and attract a doctor to their town or teachers or whoever it might be. That's a little different than what we're talking about here. We're talking about something that's going to change the landscape. 1,800 housing units over the course of 3 years is a project I don't think we've seen in Kansas in a long time.
All right. Would anybody have an objection putting this on the list to get more information and figure out the scalability of that project?
I would support that.
This is 10. I support further due diligence on this.
Okay. All right, Senator, thank you. Are there anything else in housing? Let's see. What is next on the other enablers? Anybody have anything in other enablers? There's kind of a long list there. I've got a couple if no one else has anything.
Go ahead. I had a few that I flagged, but I need to look at them first.
Okay. I had the Sporting KC ask for it's $95 million ask. I think it could probably be scalable, but it is to bring the World Cup, to help bring the World Cup to the area. We're really close to getting that. We've got our bid in, and we should hear back soon. Something like this would send a message to the selection committee that we're in it to win it. As I know there are other people on the committee that could probably speak to the World Cup soccer, but it's if the area was able to get that type of an event, I mean, it's several Super Bowls in a row, and it's a long-term commitment or long-term revenue stream for the area. It's huge. Kansas City could be, the state of Kansas could become kind of the epicenter in the United States for soccer with an investment like that. But I know there are other people that can comment on that on this committee. And I'm still trying to find my notes.
Tan, I think you're on mute. Were you trying to talk there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it would help if I took myself off mute. I think Sporting KC has two submissions here. One's for the entertainment district and one's for relocating some fields. Just to keep things in perspective, from my experience, youth sports it's going to continue to grow. I mean, the Striker Soccer Complex we have here in town when we're in season has been a huge economic boost to the general Northeast corridor of our city, that and the sports forum that we have out there. And so to create any kind of hub for these, transit dollars and everything else is huge. From a soccer perspective, hosting a World Cup would be a major accomplishment for our great state. I know the dollars they're asking here between 122 and 130 is like one's a $30 million investment and one's a $95 million investment. The great thing about the Sporting KC area is it already has a rabid fan base. So US Soccer and FIFA will look at that. But it also already has a built-in stadium that's in the Kansas City, Kansas area, the Legends area. So this would be addition to that in the training around it. We would be, and keep in mind, I have no stake in Sporting KC, but I think we wouldn't be doing ourselves justice if we didn't explore these two items further to see what, Sporting KC itself and the other municipalities and developers in the area are looking at, what their investment dollars are, how can we match it, et cetera.
This is Brett Leopold. I'd like to look at this further as well. And I'm sorry I joined late. I had a flight early this morning, was delayed, so I just got on about 20 minutes ago, but thank you.
Brett, this is Andrew Dave. I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman. If we could look at it a little bit more, I think you summed it up. And Tian, thank you for your supplemental description. I think it's a huge impact, a historic impact. I'd be curious of what there's got to be, and I apologize, I was trying to pull up the description and reread it quickly, but what kind of ongoing kind of legacy investment there is with that. I mean, I know it's more than just that series of weeks when the World Cup was in the States. So what of this investment kind of lasts, I think would be hugely impactful. But as you and Tian described, Mr. Chairman, it's one of the fastest growing sports. Our state has carved out a niche. I know there was other proposals. I want to say that I don't remember the dollar amount, but the G1 group proposal is also interesting to me. I would like to see more information just because I think that sport is well positioned for Kansas. So how do we amplify that across the state? So I would agree, more information.
Yeah, you mentioned the G1 group. I know I was reading through theirs as well. Their ask is only 25 million. They're going to build a whole stadium and entertainment district down there, and you don't need to look too much further than the baseball stadium that you all built down there and what kind of impact that had for that area that was pretty much non-existent before that. Their ask is only 25 million, and they have, I think, 50 million or 75 million match for that from the city and from an investment group. And so I would include that in all of this because it would certainly bring a major league soccer team to that area eventually, but at least a minor league that maybe could tie into the Sporting KC eventually. But if you remember back, I guess when we hosted it 10 years ago or so, or what, not 15 years ago? whenever it was.
94.
Yeah, okay. Well, right after that is when I think Tian could tell you that we started our new soccer league in the United States
Yeah.
because it was so popular. It brought a lot of attention to the sport. And it's a younger
Yeah.
demographic, and it'd be good to keep these young people in our state.
Yeah, I
and
would
so in full transparency, guys, the G1 group, that's actually our division. I didn't rate this because I wanted to abstain from the process, but I'm happy to provide some clarity. Just high level, once again, in soccer, and Representative Tarwater was going down this path. In 1994, we hosted the World Cup. In 1996, we launched Major League Soccer because the demand was so big. The World Cup's getting ready to take place this year. We will see an incremental uptick for it. If you look at pure demographics of workforce or their fans, Gen Z and millennials actually prefer soccer over baseball because the average soccer fan's age is like in the late 20s, and a baseball fan is actually in 57. And so there's definitely, from a workforce where retention and quality of life, they're going to prefer soccer over some of these sports. This is one of the largest, fastest growing sports. North America's scheduled to host the World Cup in 2026. So we also see that there's going to be a huge demand and uptick in just the sports interest here stateside as well. So us investing in some infrastructure now before it gets really big will put us even further along in the development process to get eyes and ears of having the infrastructure in place. If you look at things from just overall on the G1 project, sister cities of theirs from Des Moines to Oklahoma City to Colorado Springs to Omaha have already built or in the process of building or approved funding for this type of stadium. So the G1 project, it's a $50 million soccer specific stadium that will eventually host a women's soccer team, lacrosse, etc. It's a community asset that will be great for tournaments. I mean, other than the home season games itself, but it's asking $25 million from the state. The city and county will work on matching the other $25 million. In the private sector itself, the development group will actually put up $15 to $20 million of its own money to bring the team here, not to mention acquire the real estate around it and then develop it for mixed use process. So there's the ED and travel tourism to all three of those soccer projects. I think my recommendation, abstaining from the G1 group one, is the two Sporting KC ones. We have to go get further due diligence here, right? These are things that the infrastructure that you build here becomes a destination for soccer tournaments and events from NCAA to other stuff that will bring a lot of commerce to whatever city is hosting it.
And Mr. Chairman, I support the idea of investing in some infrastructure in both our largest populated areas of the city, right, Wichita and Kansas City area, for these projects that we've just discussed.
Anyone else have comments or questions? Okay, so we'll add, excuse me, we'll add all three of those to our list of research. And I would like to see what the scalability is on the $95 million so that we can make other things work as well. I like the way the G1 group has already pledged other monies and the city has. It does mention that there are matches in here on the Sporting KC. I'd like to get all that information before we present it to the executive group. But any objection to that? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone have anything else under other enablers?
Mr. Chairman, I had, I'm not sure if anybody else flagged any. I was curious to know what people thought of number 68. Full disclosure, Bourbon County is my home county, but I don't live there now. I saw, I noted that they, this is in regards to a hospital, and I don't know if since the time of submission till now, if anything's changed with it, but what jumped out to me is that there's millions of dollars that are leaving the state because healthcare needs are being met in Missouri. And so I don't know if this is a scalable opportunity or something that could be done, maybe not at the $25 million ask level, but I guess I don't like the idea of dollars that people are spending every year leaving the state when something might be able to be done to keep those in state.
So I don't know a whole lot about this, but I do know that the Fort Scott area, although that hospital closed, they started a smaller hospital type place that was more right sized for the community. And that spurred us to pass a law 2 years ago, I think, for right sizing healthcare. And there's funding in that. We should probably look into that to make sure that they are aware of it, because we kind of picked up off of what they did when they lost their hospital, because it seemed to work quite well for the area. And I'm surprised that there's still people leaving Fort Scott to go to Missouri for healthcare. I mean, I could see them coming up to Johnson County, but we should certainly, if you'd like, we can get more information on that. But I do know that we have other mechanisms of funding those things.
Okay, might be worth getting more information. Yeah, maybe something that it's better resourced elsewhere.
Okay.
Chairman, I did have one more project under other enablers. It's project 74. It was more of a question from the city of DeSoto and their economic revitalization infrastructure. This mentions the Sunflower Army ammunition plant. I want to make sure that there's not something we need to do here. And I could be mixing things up, but aren't there plans for this ammunition plant potentially already?
What number was that?
Number 74. Or am I crossing wires on ammunition plants here?
I think there's some rumors on the use of that land. I cannot either confirm or deny it at this point.
Okay, I just didn't want us to rule that project out for any additional funding from our group that could help secure any deals if it was needed. That's all.
Yeah, would this be worth flagging as a question mark? I had also noted as potential. I don't know if there's coordination maybe with Commerce Department on something that might be in play or not, but
yeah, we could certainly flag this.
Mr. Chairman, as we're flagging other enablers, I don't know if we already had a discussion on kind of infrastructure. I know that from our last call, several of us kind of talked about the litany of infrastructure investments is kind of hard to justify and hard to separate, but when they're tied to job creation, it intrigues us, and I know it intrigues me as an economic developer. So the one that, and I apologize, I have kind of mine out of order, so I can't reference the project number, but the 119th and I-35 in Olathe, I think it's a $5 million request, was intriguing to me because of the size of the request was rather meager compared to a 5,000 job commitment. And so, or maybe that's probably too strong a word to say. The description in the narrative alluded to 5,000 jobs. And so that one, I don't know that I saw one that was any higher than that anywhere on the spreadsheet. So I was intrigued to find out, is that just kind of indirect information, or is there a commitment there? Obviously, we know that that part of Johnson County is growing swiftly. So that was one that I was really intrigued by. And then again, others that are kind of tied infrastructure to job creation, I guess I would just kind of flag all of those. But again, apologies if you've already discussed that item.
I don't think we've discussed that, but I think that might have something to do with the same type of project that we were discussing with the previous one.
Yeah, and then absolutely, if it's related to that previous project you just mentioned, then obviously I stand down.
But we could certainly get more information for you on that, because I know that there's a lot of development going on out that way and a lot of commitment from the state already. And that might be the local match that they're supposed to come up with. I mean, there's a lot of that showed up in these requests. anytime we have incentive programs, the state will participate with infrastructure, but the city or county usually has to participate as well. And a lot of those ended up on as Spark requests for their share. But we can certainly get more information for you on that. I'm not sure what number that was. Would anybody know the number on that?
Number 3. Right? At least I have it as number 3 on my list. Looks like they
Yeah, that
have
looks
it at
correct. Yes. Yeah. I apologize. I reordered mine and
62.
trying to unwind that has been a problem, but thank
That
you.
was the $7.5 million request. Is that right, Andrew?
No, is that number 62 that's just on the screen now of 119th and I-35 business? I was, again, trying to use brief notes, but that 5,000 job intrigued me, so that was what I wanted more information on.
So just to clarify, in number under the same category, item number 3, if we can scroll up to that, Anna, or whoever's doing this now, is also from the city of Olathe. It references up to 500 jobs. And I want to make sure that we get the right one for you here, Andrew. One's a $7.5 million, and that number 62 was a different.
Yeah.
Was
I was
different
referencing
about
the other one to number 62, but
the other one. Okay.
thank you.
Okay, we'll get more information on that. I apologize. I kind of skimmed through a lot of these local asks because they all, a lot of these municipalities received their own Spark dollars and they chose not to spend them on these items, but then they're coming back to us. So was there anything else under other enablers? I had number 107 flagged just because it was UAVs, and it ties into our aviation industry. We have our director of aviation, Bob Brock, is really huge into UAVs. He's done a lot of research. He's a lieutenant colonel, or was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and so he has a tremendous amount of background in UAVs. Kansas is one of the first states, if not the only state, that we can actually file an FAA flight plan for non-line of sight UAVs. And we think that will bring a lot of companies to the Kansas area so that they can test UAVs as they develop them. And so this is one of the things I flagged just because I know that it's a future industry that I think with our aviation background, we can certainly capitalize on. Excuse me. So, and I'd love for you guys to all meet Bob Brock because he's pretty incredible when it comes to these kinds of things.
Chairman, I concur. Obviously, know Mr. Brock, and I know Sam can speak to this as well, but I would concur. And I know it obviously has applicability up in Salina with the K-State Salina campus and across our state. So I had ranked that one high as well, sir.
I'm all for exploring this one further. I'm actually embarrassed that I missed this.
Yeah,
okay, Tian. It happens to all of us.
Yeah, I support exploring further as well. I was curious to know if any of the work that's being done by NIAR, if any of this is duplicative of work that they're already doing in the state. But the way that you explained it, Representative Tarwater, it sounds like it may be strategic, given its focus on UAVs.
I know NIAR is doing quite a bit of research with UAVs, and it'd be good to get the two institutions together, that's for sure. So does anybody have any issues with adding that to the list? Okay. Are there any other submissions that anyone has flagged that we need to discuss? I think I had one more that I flagged that I wanted more information on, just because I'm familiar with the company. Let me see if I can find it. And Sam, you reminded me of it because it has to do with NIAR. But there's a company. Go ahead. All right. So there's a company in Wichita called Envision. They work with the blind community and they give them jobs. They train them how to work and how to live. They have a project that they're looking at for a new product that they want to bring to market, which is always good. And it's in conjunction with Wichita State and NIAR. And it's a new innovative product for a company that serves the blind. And it's a smart tech for automated warehousing that would help companies hire blind people. And so I wanted to see if anybody else had flagged that. It's a $2.5 million ask. I don't know if they can get other local funding or federal funding with it, but it just seemed like a good thing to at least look into. I know those of you in Wichita are probably familiar with Envision.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Envision. I mean, I think that they do really good work, right? They've got a great reputation for, I think, using what they have, using it well. I don't have any problem exploring this one further. Excuse me.
That's
I
number
concur.
130.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I was actually going to bring that one up, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, thank you for hitting it before I did. I think that obviously they're leading in the blind and visually impaired community across the country. They're nationally regarded. And I think, yeah, if we can continue to get more information and see how that might be impactful for our workforce, I think it'd be time and investment well spent.
Okay, any objection to putting that on the list? Okay, seeing none. And Andrew, did you have something else?
No, ironically, that was the one I was going to bring up. So thank you.
Okay, all right. Anyone have anything else on other enablers? I'm sure we left out a subject. Is there anything else that someone has flagged that we haven't already spoken to?
And we're still just looking at building improvements and construction, right, Chairman?
Well, we're in the wrap up stage to anything that we haven't already discussed under any other topic. If there's something else that someone wants to look at, let's talk about those now.
Well, more of a general question for me then, like under work training programs, just in general, or workforce training. Is that something that needs to be discussed, or did I miss that already?
I thought that was on the previous tab, but we can certainly talk about it. Anything that we have left out, let's bring those up if you have items that were flagged.
Yeah, for me, it's
Go
a
ahead,
general
Tim.
bucket more for me. I mean, there's several colleges, universities, and communities that talk about, hey, we want to invest in infrastructure to upskill our workforce. And so I'm sure they're all great projects in all these various communities, but how can we do more and be inclusive from the state perspective? Be open to anybody that has expertise in just workforce upskilling and kind of their insights on that.
So I know it's a tremendous need, and I know that we looked at it closely. We actually went to all of the community colleges and tech colleges in the appropriations process this year and had them all submit any project that they could get local matching for. We wanted to make sure they had matching, and we funded, I think, 9 or 10 of these through that process this year. That was part of that money that went from took the appropriation from 700 to 400 million that's left in Spark, because the process, the appropriations process funded quite a bit of that stuff for the junior college or for the community colleges technical schools. If Senator Clays is still on here, he might be able to comment as to what those were, but I know we went through a lot of funding, and everyone all these institutions had an opportunity to bring us something.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think if I might, just the major universities receive direct appropriations in their line items. So those universities, and then our community colleges also had line items for specific projects. Our tech colleges, however, I believe the way that we handled those is we gave them a pool of money from which to draw. They did not have specific projects in there, but there was a lot of money that was allocated for higher education and our technical schools and our community colleges through that process. Some of it was ARPA money, some of it was not. There were reasons for that, whether it was eligible or not for those projects. And that's kind of what I was talking about with the MIH grants, RHID, when you're talking about housing, whether it's something that's actually ARPA eligible or whether it's not, and then you don't necessarily want the projects competing for those state dollars where we know we can spend it on that, as opposed to the ARPA dollars that have more strict requirements. But I think we've taken care of in that process community tech and the Regents universities.
Okay, that's great insight. I did have one more along the drones and like unmanned or aircraft vehicles here. Submission 238 was from Pittsco Education LLC out of Pittsburgh, Kansas. Did anybody see this? This was once again kind of going down the same thing of what the Salina School was doing and the other drone project was. This was towards drone education.
Yeah, this is Andrew. I flagged it high. Obviously, I know many folks know that Pittsco's great reputation in our state and across the country for training materials and the displays and the primary and secondary school systems across the country and the world even. I thought it was innovative and just creative and kind of pulls our state into those kind of future leaning and cutting edge industries, which is what I've tried to consistently say. So I think it's worth exploring further at minimum, and I rank it very highly. And then Senator Clay, just to kind of follow up on your comment from a second ago, I had ranked many of those programs at the community college level fairly high, not knowing that obviously there was the legislative process. It was going to be carving out some funding. So I think that covers the need. But again, I was reinforcing the thought of whether it was the program in Pratt Community College with welding or Seward with trucking, the fact that our community colleges are zeroing in on very targeted and delineated training materials per industry needs in their region of the state, I think is encouraging. I'm glad to hear the legislature saw fit as well and is funding accordingly. Thank you.
Is everybody good with exploring that one project out from Pittsco Education further and dropping in that bucket with the other UAB projects?
I am. I mean, it's an excellent company, and I have a hard time, sizing whether that seems like a lot of money, but maybe it's reasonable for that sort of initiative. But more information would be helpful.
Thank you, Brett.
One quick question, Representative Tower and Tian. It doesn't seem like anything with regard to water has been covered. There may be tourism that hasn't been covered, and the last thing would be, and it may be that no one saw fits there, right? And the last one would be folks that sent in kind of 3 specific submissions that had fallen into other areas. I would just want to make sure that we kind of cover those, just if they haven't been covered, just to make sure that we're covering something that someone explicitly asked us to look at.
And one of the, I don't know if it's one of those or not, but I had noted on the deprioritized tabs, the deprioritized programs tab, project number 23, I thought was an innovative proposal deploying high-tech biomass processing centers. So I've had a limited conversation with some of those who are involved in this one. I don't know if anybody else on the committee has as well, but I think it's intriguing to me in terms of the opportunity for, job creation, use of establishing some processing centers at different rural areas of the state, and then something that enables farmers and growers to be able to use the product here in the state that's being produced. I'd be an advocate for flagging this one as having the committee take a look at and maybe get some more information about.
Sam, is that the Prairie Foods one for
Yes.
15 million?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
I actually flagged two items out of the deprioritized programs, and that was one of them. So I would be in support of that. The other one I was in support of out of that tab was item 17 from the Wichita Airport Authority. This was more of a fact finding for me of what does air cargo expansion at the Eisenhower Airport look like just from a pure transit perspective for us in job creation to getting more products, regardless who makes it in and out of our city and tied to the interstate and, through our state and everything else. It was a $10 million request. So for me, it was like, hey, that's interesting. I wonder if that would look like if we could utilize some of our existing airport runways and warehouses and everything else to help make us a hub for air cargo and distribution.
And this is Andrew. I would agree with that. And coming from a city council meeting where we just were speaking on maintenance, repair, and overhaul and new incentive programs that our city is trying to support within that MRO industry, I wholeheartely agree. And I know that just being down here, that all of the air cargo space and the ramp space has been absorbed by Amazon and others of late. So I have no doubt that that's not a coming trend, or is a trend already at other airports across the state. But obviously at Eisenhower is the largest commercial airport in the state. I would support that.
Yeah, the MRO thing is really huge. And I know that NIR is working on, I think we funded NIR this year in the appropriations process to help them build hangar space, both here and in Salina, because there's a lot of people looking for MRO right now, a lot of companies. And it looks like you guys are going to be able to convert all the, is it the 777s, Andrew?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the 777s to a freighter aircraft cargo conversion to a freighter.
Yeah, huge opportunity for you guys, I think, down there. And I think that's going to really take off. No pun intended.
We hope it takes off, Chairman.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed that anyone has flagged that you want to put on this list?
Is there any insight here? It's part of probably a workforce training, but do we have any inside expertise here on just wind energy itself? Is that something that's important to our state from a renewable energy source or anything like that? Because I saw a submission, and I'll be honest, in full transparency, again, this is a colleague of mine through YPO submitted some wind training, and I have intimate knowledge of his business of just like scheduled maintenance. This would go back to workforce training for me of maintenance of those wind turbines and the training that comes into those. And, it's, gosh, these guys are starting out making $70,000 a year, if not more. But, when I think of this, I think of like Mike Rowe and all the jobs, all the non-fancy jobs that he shows on his shows that people make great livings for that we just don't have enough visibility on.
See, and I'll jump in. I know a little bit of knowledge, and others on the call probably do as well. But obviously, Cloud County Community College, there's other community colleges in our state that have programs. This isn't an opportunity for investment in our state. Obviously, Siemens Gamesa has the nacelle plant in Hutchinson, Kansas, and that's probably the most well known. But there's other manufacturers and suppliers in our state in the wind industry. So this is absolutely a growing opportunity. I think it's something definitely worth further examination for sure.
Okay,
I
so
would
number
agree.
So number 250 needs to be put on the list. All right. Is there anything else that we've missed?
And to answer John's question of water, me personally, I didn't see any water infrastructure needs that should be addressed by ARPA funds. And maybe I'm generalizing this too much, but this was, for me, maintenance type issues that I think the local municipalities need to be taken care of to take care of their residents. For us, it was looking at how do we invest in transformative and catalytic type stuff. So I wanted to make sure that we addressed or recognize John's comment as he's facilitating and reminding us of things. Now, if there are other panel members that have flagged any kind of water infrastructure, we definitely want to make sure we discuss that as well.
I tend to agree with Tian on that. I know that the locals can pay for that through property taxes. They can also bond it out and use property taxes to pay for it over time. And in the other category was tourism. And I think that, you know, what I was talking about was professional sports when I brought that up in an earlier meeting. And I think we've addressed that with the World Cup and the G1 proposal in Wichita. Those were some of my concerns when I brought up the tourism part of it. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
There was a project that was categorized under general water and sewer infrastructure upgrades, number 169 on idea submission rating 4B tab. It was for a Kansas hydroponic partnership. I don't know if anybody has had conversations with any of the stakeholders here. I think it's up in the northeast part of the state. This is located along I-35 corridor in southwest Johnson County. This kind of popped out to me. It's not one that is like a lot of the others in here that is in more of an economic development, looks like pursuit that has to do with establishing a hydroponic operation that would provide food resource to the greater region.
So Sam, I am familiar with that company. I know that, or at least I think it's the same, the hydroponic issue. And I talked to Kansas State about trying to get them involved in it so that the students can learn about it, because it is an up and coming deal. I think Pat Roberts is deeply involved in this program. U.S. Organic Farms of Kansas, they're going to use 240 acres. They're going to build a 50-acre building, and it would be to produce leafy produce. It's supposedly going to create 120 agricultural engineering and research jobs in the Gardner area. So I think you're talking about the same.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of private investment there. We could certainly get more information from them, but when I talked to Kansas State about this project 2 or 3 weeks ago, they said that they weren't quite ready to take the next step on it, but that could have just been Kansas State. But I would have no problems getting more information on this, because I think it's a future industry for sure.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like we have, others can speak more to this, but I don't know that we are invested in this industry very much in the state. So it sounded like kind of a new opportunity. I would support exploring this further and getting some more information to see if it has merit.
I would as well, Sam. I ranked it high for that very reason, on kind of the cutting edge. And then, Tian, to your comment, I mean, the only other kind of water and sewer infrastructure projects that I scored high or even medium at that rate were ones that had a very clear justification in their description about job creation. But the one that I did flag for more information or question, Mr. Chairman, would be the Osawatomie State Hospital public water system upgrade. It's a large number, and it's from KDHE. And I found, obviously, I know several of the submissions by our state agencies, I think, were limited in scope, and maybe this has been addressed in other sectors of the legislative or budget process. But I just saw an opportunity there with water, and obviously our state mental health hospitals is a key priority, so I flagged it.
Yeah, so I saw that in there and I ruled it out because I know that we have tremendous amount of funding in our appropriations bill for Osawatomie State Public, or for the Osawatomie State Hospital. And I took out all state agencies from the ARPA fund because the legislature looks at those budgets every year. And we're going to go back on the 21st and 22nd and start that process again. And so all the state area budgets are already pretty much taken care of in the appropriations process. And I can tell you the state hospitals got a lot of extra funding this year.
Okay, I stand down and I was just asking the question. Thank you, sir.
Representative Tarwater, one thing I'd suggest would be that the team in the background has been cataloging everything that's been selected. If you guys wanted to take like a 3 or 4 minute break, when we came back, we could actually show you kind of, and I realize these funds are, not set for sure, but what came out by area, just so you can see kind of the totals of what you selected. Would that be worthwhile for you?
I certainly would. I think that a list would be useful. With the funding is fine, but I think that we would want and this is just me speaking, I think we would want the executive committee to look at these and come up with scalability.
Oh, for sure. If anything, the totals now would be the high side for sure of anything.
I think we did a pretty good job of spending the $400 million.
But by the way, one other thing I'd say to the team is that on the hydroponics one, that really isn't a water and sewer. That should be in the growth industries.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I know we're looking at our time here. If we don't have time to do that during this meeting, I would certainly appreciate being able to have the documents sent to all panelists so that we can review after the meeting. But it might just be good to do another review over the ones that have been selected, just to get a sense of, okay, what did we choose here, and do we have the kind of representation across the state that we had hoped for out of these? Do we have any significant gaps? I know there's a lot of further exploration involved in many of these, but we've, after a while, they begin to get a little blurry as you've looked at so many of them.
I second Sam's suggestion there in terms of kind of recategorizing these and taking another look, and whether it requires another brief Zoom call, I'm all for that.
So I know that this is John's last scheduled call, I think, with our group. But if he's not available, then we'll find someone else that can facilitate the meeting. But I do think that if we could get these sent out, and let's see, some of the Boston consulting people might be able to get with some of these companies to get more information. I'd like to get more information from each of these submissions so that we can make a better decision. And then before we make our presentation but it's only in a few days though, when we make our presentation, whether this is prepared in full or not, we can at least present this and let them know that we will be following up with them in the next few days with better suggestions or more thorough explanations anyway. It will require quite a bit of work from everybody on the committee if you're still up to it. But I think we're finally to the meat of things now after all these meetings that we're going to be able to make a difference.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. I think that it's important for all of us to finish strong and make sure that we're presenting the best ideas with as much information as we can to the executive committee so they can take it from there and make the best decisions.
So just a little housekeeping. We have to meet with the executive committee next Monday. So in 6 days, at least with the short list. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I believe that. John, you can let us know.
Yeah, the meeting is on Monday and the goal would be to get kind of a pre-read out on Friday. I think within that, though, you could have you could say there's further analysis needed in some of the areas. I mean, just be upfront about it where you don't feel it's been complete.
Okay.
And I think the executive committee has until, I think, June 30th. And so we've got a little bit of time, but I'd like to give them the meat of the presentation anyway in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
You know, one thing that would help me, even looking at my own submission, I felt like in the submission form itself, and I understand that we have to filter and draw the line somewhere by all means, but now that we have this short list, to actually have the PDF of every of the short lists, you know, so that have different buckets and line items, that would be just great intel originally to share with our panel members here, our fellow panel members, along with the summarized list of everything that we flagged as high, right? So I believe there were one pagers and there were several boxes with like 400 words each, where we're just doing kind of the executive summary now. That would be a great start for us, at least on my end. I don't know what the other panel members think.
I would agree that the spreadsheet that was initially sent out was very difficult to navigate, at least for me on my computer. It jumped around quite a bit. It was hard to read the submissions for what they were. And so if we could get a better way to present that in a Word document or like you said, a PDF type thing, with all the information for each of these companies, that would be fantastic.
Hi, team. We'll do that later today for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anna. That'd be great.
Could I make one further amended request to that? In addition to those details, which I think would be very helpful, maybe having an executive summary sheet or two that classifies each of the projects just by name and maybe just a very short description by categories that we can quickly see what the nature of these high projects are at a single glance, and then be able to dig in deeper to the individual sheets.
Yep, happy to include that.
I would also tell the committee that Matt Condon wasn't able to be here, so he might have a suggestion or two for us to add to that list. If that's okay with you guys, we'll go ahead and let him add those. And my guess is he's on the same page with us as far as all of these, but he might have one or two that he might have seen that we didn't. And so if we do, I'll make sure that you get those, and those are highlighted so that you can take a close look at them.
Perfect.
Could I ask the support team, do you have the totals of just the funding? I mean, just once again, these are the raw numbers now, but just kind of curious.
2.4.
Yeah, 532.4 million for all the ones that we've rated high in this meeting.
Okay, got it.
So we narrowed it down from 9 billion.
Yeah. Actually, the high fit submissions here were a little bit over 2.3. So
All right, everybody break out your personal checkbooks to increase our funding amount.
yeah, but some pretty important stuff. So
John, if this is the last time we converse, I just want to express my gratitude for you helping us lead this charge and facilitating, and really just thank you to Anna and really the whole staff. So grateful. You guys kind of are the conduit and getting the deck, the presentation, the slides and all that stuff together. So just wanted to express all my gratitude. A million thanks. Appreciate it.
thanks. Appreciate all the hard work from the team and all your judgment you applied to this, and it certainly all came to a head today. So thank you very much.
Well, I know it wasn't easy herding cats, John, but I mean, you've got a committee here that's full of some pretty dynamic individuals, but you did a really good job of keeping us in order. I really appreciate the work you did and your staff.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And so we'll get back to you with the, and once again, the staff has done an awesome job too. It certainly wasn't me. But we'll get back to you with everything that was just requested. And then we're going to be meeting with the chairs tomorrow kind of to begin strategizing around, what it makes sense to communicate to the SMARC Executive Committee. So lots of work to do in the next few days.
Okay, one last thing, Andrew pointed out that Tim McKee is a member of this committee, but he had, I think, surgery or something, and he's kind of out of it for a while. But I do know that he did take the time to score some of this stuff. I haven't received it yet, but I know he'll be sending that over.
Okay, great. Yeah, he gave me a heads up to that. Yeah.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, I think if I understood the process right, it's you as the chairman and Tiana as our vice chair will be presenting to the Spark Executive Committee. I would imagine that we as committee members can observe and watch that. There's no expectation of participation or zooming in. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. John knows how it's supposed to work. Can you comment on that?
I believe, Elias, I heard, yeah, the chairs would be presenting, but I think everyone else might be given a invite to it.
Okay.
It's a public meeting.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
There'll
I
be a
just didn't know if it was one of those-
simulcast of the meeting available online that we can provide the link to you in advance.
Perfect. Thank you.
And you said that's Monday.
It is.
Do you have a time?
Ethan, can we send that holdout to everybody with
3 to
more details
3 to
on
5.
the link?
Yep, happy to get the calendar hold shared with folks.
Perfect. Thank you, Ethan.
Okay, John, the floor is yours.
Oh. Just a question. Did you end up doing the summarization just even by the categories, or that was just overall?
Yeah, we did. I'm happy to share in just a minute.
Just so folks can see kind of where it ended up by general kind of area.
I'll tell you guys what, while we're waiting for the team to do that, I am over the moon excited. I didn't think we would do all these things. We're 8 minutes early. So
Yeah.
we have exceeded all expectations because I know we're there's a lot of experts here and we're a spirited bunch. And so I'm pleasantly surprised that we got through everything and we didn't have to do an additional meeting or run long on this one. So
Sure.
that was great.
Don, I'm curious, while we're waiting too, I'm curious as the other three advisory panels kind of, I assume they're in a similar trajectory and a similar point, but if you can give an update there and maybe the rest of the committee already discussed this morning. Again, apologies for me jumping on late, but I know the base grants have obviously been notified across the state. So I know there's quite a bit of overlap between Spark proposals and base proposals, and that's coming into more picture through the state as well. So I don't know if you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I'm personally not that familiar with base. I've just been focused pretty much exclusively on this. In terms of the other two, connectivity and efficiency and modernization have been kind of locked in for a little bit. They're much smaller, more focused areas. And so they're going to be presenting those two panels. The chairs are going to be presenting on Friday. Health and education and economic revitalization obviously covered a much broader span of things. And so that's going to be Monday. So, and when you add it all together, obviously, it's going to be way more than, Elizabeth, the Spark Executive Committee is going to have a lot to work with in terms of potential things to think about. So,
Mr. Chairman, would it be relatively easy for us to find out in part of our due diligence process of, I'm making up a fake number here, of the 20 deals that we've approved to get further due diligence on? Can we run that by the state or who oversees base to make sure that they're not receiving funding already? That's a relatively easy process, yeah?
yeah, we can.
It is, and that was one of the things, I think we requested that already, that any base, anything that we have flagged that also received base grants would be, we'd be notified of that.
Perfect. And out of courtesy for those who didn't make the short list, will we be sending an email to everybody that submitted and saying, hey, thank you for your submission, but at this time, I know I hate being left high and dry, especially when I was in my younger days interviewing for jobs and I would never hear back after resume submission.
Yeah.
I would love to.
They didn't all hire you?
Yeah. Yeah, the thought is that people would be made aware at some point. We just have been trying to think about when's the right time in the process to do it with, given things are going to the Spark Executive Committee and it could all change. So, but yeah, definitely we'll make sure that we find the right way to close the loop. You're
Perfect.
right. It's
Thank
happened to me many times. Here's where kind of, once again, with that recategorization out of general water and sewer infrastructure of the hydroponics idea submission, here's the associated dollars, and realize that the dollars, that's probably the high side, right? So I guess I would just leave it up to you. If you guys want to try and apply minimum and target ask to this, we can, but it sounds to me like you felt there were a lot more gates that needed to be crossed before you'd be able to say anything about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me personally, before we go into minimum and target ask, we just need further due diligence. You just got to have more intel to make those decisions, in my opinion.
I would agree with that, but I would add to that for the Spark Executive Committee. I think many of us, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but the panel, I'm assuming, would be willing to further engage in helping to maybe make recommendations of a minimum or target for each of those once
Sure.
more due diligence has been done,
Got it.
if that's helpful for the executive committee. And
Yeah.
I know that in my conversations with different members, they have communicated a desire to have as much information as possible.
Yeah.
So we might just keep that door open.
Yeah, because one of the advantages of the minimum and target asks would be, once again, if there are limited funds and you said, okay, well, we got to make some calls in innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. What are the things that might fall out first, and what are the things that are most important? So at least then they'd know, right? So anyway, but it sounded like it was probably a little premature to do that. And so we'll continue to do the work there. Okay. I think we've talked about the next steps. I mean, we'll get back to you with all the information out of this. We'll try and close loops, and we'll be getting back together with Tian and Representative Tarwater tomorrow. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Last
Thanks,
comment.
everybody.
Once again, appreciate
Last
it.
comment from me really is just thank everybody in case we don't get together as a group again. Appreciate all the time invested, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership as well and putting this group to work. So looking forward to making this recommendation to the executive committee.
All right. Yeah. Thanks everyone for all their help. Good.
Thanks.
What a great group.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.